Welcome everyone to Ensuring Success 2025. This is the end of day one. This is our 7th session of day one. We have 7 more for you tomorrow, so don't go too far after this session ends today. We have 2 hashtags we'd love you to use if you want to talk about us on social media. That's hashtag December CPE or Ensuring Success 2025, or both. Feel free to tell all your friends about us. Just want to explain a couple things for those of you who might be new joining us this session. There's a box under the window where you're watching me right now that says Ask a Question. You can post questions in there and they'll come right to us here on the set so we can share those with our speakers. If you have questions about a technical issue you may be having, you can reach people we have standing by in the production room. And the email to reach them at is at the top of your screen. It's info@ensuringsuccess.com, or there's also a phone number there that you can text to if you have an immediate problem and you've got to get a text in right away. A couple things I want to also cover housekeeping-wise. One is that this session, this conference, would not be possible without the assistance and the support of our sponsors. So I'd like to share with you right now who they are. They include ADP, Avalara, Canopy, CPA.com, Digits, eFile for Biz, Field Guide, Carbon, Count, WriteWorks, SafeSend, SureLink, ValueInsights.ai, Walters Kluwer, and Xero. We thank all of them for making this event possible for us. And as for CPE credit, if you're planning on getting CPE credit for this session, the way it works is we will display 3 codes on the bottom of your screen, 1 code at each of 3 different intervals during the session. Each code is a 3-digit numerical code. You'll need to write down that code each time we display it. So you'll have 3 sets of 3-digit codes by the end of this session. At the end of the day today or tomorrow or next week, next month, actually this will be available all the way to next December at the ensuringsuccess.com website. At the top of the screen, it says CPE/CE credit. You can click that and you'll be asked to enter the email you used to register. If you haven't registered yet, you'll be asked to register, and then you'll be taken to the screen where we list all the sessions, fill in the blanks for all the codes that you collected for every session you went to, and you can immediately download your CPE certificates. So that's how that works. This is session number 7. It is staffing, and we broke that into a bunch of categories, which could include outsourcing, offshoring, remote, temporary, hybrid, however you want to define staffing. We'll let our staff, our team of panelists here define it for you even better. And our panelists include Michelle Voyer, Randy Crabtree, Kenji Kuramoto, and our co-moderator, Alexandra DeFelice. And I'd like each of them to introduce themselves right now. Michelle?
Hi, everybody. Michelle Voyer. I'm with Cohen Resnick, and my primary role involves driving growth across our industry verticals, as well as technology and automation. And I've been leading CAS groups across domestically and internationally over the past 15 years.
My turn, Randy Crabtree. Great to see everybody, even though I don't truly see you, but glad you're here. I am co-founder of a company called Trimerit. Trimerit's a specialty tax firm. We deal with tax credits and incentives, and a lot going on with that right now with the new tax bill, so it's been pretty busy, and pretty much I just go around the country and talk, so this is going to be a lot of fun for me. Hopefully you too.
Hello, I am Kenji Kuramoto. I'm the founder of Acuity. We are a CAS practice and started a little over 20 years ago. And we had mostly outsourced CFOs, accounting, a tax practice. We recently this year combined in a great big merger with about 14 other firms. And so with a private equity backed transaction. So we've grown pretty substantially, but yeah, I've kind of lived the full life cycle of everything from being by myself, founding a firm, all the way to scaling and growing up. And then ultimately kind of becoming part of what's now a very large firm. So yeah, I've seen a lot of the staffing issues we're going to talk about today, the things that have worked and some of the things that were maybe a little challenging. So
and you'll be back tomorrow to talk about what CAS is all about too. So we'll get a double dose of
Too much of me, I'm sure.
Agreed.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice. I'm Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer for JMBM Law Firm in Los Angeles. designated bell ringer and co-moderator. Been here for every session today and will be there for every session tomorrow.
Oh, and speaking of designated bell ringer, I forgot to mention that when we do post CPE codes on the screen, we will call your attention to them by the sound of this bell. All right. And I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor. And I think we're going to kick this off with Alexandra. Are you going to issue a poll to our audience?
I am not going to issue a poll to the audience. Instead, everything went haphazard. We were ready to go, and we had lunch, and then Randy scared the heck out of me and gave me all these statistics to make me feel like this profession is in crisis. So I'm going to read off some of these stats to kick off and say, like, oh my God, is this profession going to die based on these statistics? And then I'm going to kick it back to Randy. So here's the stats that he has for me. Between 2022 and 2024, approximately 300,000 accountants and auditors left their positions, marking a 17% reduction in the profession's workforce. The AICPA estimates that 75% of current CPAs in public accounting will retire by 2038, with many expected to exit sooner. The accounting profession faces a 22% attrition rate among first-year professionals, compounding the talent shortage. And this was really interesting to me, which was that public accounting firms lose 41% of staff within 3 years versus 28% in corporate roles. So that made me completely change how we're going to handle this session. And Randy, is this reality, or is this a perception that the profession is in crisis?
I actually think it's a little of both, and not to scare people. This is not a, hey, we're doom and gloom. I love this profession. I believe this profession is going to thrive in the future, and this is the greatest profession there is out there. And so there's just some things we need to fix on what you just said, Alexandra. The perception side. There are some reality issues we need to fix, and some of those are being fixed. As I'm going to just blame myself, as people my age leave the profession. I think there's just been this mindset that we have to keep doing it this way because this is the way we've always done it. That's the perception, but that is changing. I mean, Kenji's Acuity is a great example of the change that they made when he first started that, and they were fully remote. I don't want to steal his thunder, but all these changes that companies like he have done, I'm seeing that happen all over the place right now. But my concern is that reality is not, that message of that reality is not getting out to everybody, and we need to fix that message so that we can continue to have this be the greatest profession there is.
Yeah, and one thing I see kind of spanned across those different statistics that you mentioned is just the different generations that are now working all together in the workplace, and it's demanding a different level of flexibility. I think that's a key topic that we want to discuss today. And I know that is something that millennials essentially kind of came in and demanded out of the workforce. But I know when many of us think about flexibility, we go right to the discussion of like hybrid versus in office versus work from home. And I think what we're seeing with the incoming generation, let's say Gen Z, they're actually the opposite, whereas typically a millennial comes in, they ask you in the job interview, do you allow remote work? They're looking for a yes, versus what we're looking with the Gen Zers that are coming in the interview process and asking that same question. They're actually looking to make sure that they do have a place to come into. So they're looking for the same level of flexibility around their schedules. And as they grow and they end up getting more responsibilities and family obligations and things like that. And so I think one of the overarching themes that we're seeing across the board, across generations, is flexibility.
Right, and that I think one of the things we were talking about, Randy, also, flexibility can be defined differently, right? It doesn't necessarily just mean how do you define it?
So yeah, flexibility can be anywhere. When I look at flexibility, I look at where you work, when you work, how you work, and that's what, maybe not as much millennials, but Gen Z, and honestly me too, I want that flexibility. If you as a leader within an organization trust the people, and trust is super important, that they're going to get their work done on a timely fashion, what does it matter if it's 9 to 5? What does it matter if they're doing it at their desk in Chicago or at a hotel in Rome? I mean, that's the level of flexibility that I think is important, and we've done that with our organization. But just trusting that people are going to get their work done and giving them that freedom, as much as flexibility, that freedom to do it when they want, where they want, that's part of that message of difference between reality and profession that we need to continue to get out there.
Yeah, it's funny when you mention that, Michelle, about about just different generations and how we think about flexibility. I remember in our firm when we were starting to hire younger staff, and saw the same thing too, where all they wanted was flexibility. I want to be able to work when I'm traveling and all these things. And there was a group of us who'd been around longer. There may be some who might be even be in that boomer category.
What are you saying about us?
I'm just saying, you're probably the best cheerleader in the entire accounting profession, Randy. So I don't want to hate on the boomers, but there was a little pushback on that group. It was like, wait a minute, how are we gonna work through this? And after a little bit of time, I would say that group was probably, that kind of older generation was like, actually, this is great. Like, this is fantastic. And so I think that it speaks to flexibility does mean different things to different people in the way that when you work, how you do your work, from where you work. But it certainly seems very universal that it's important to all of those generations.
And you said, and so I always think of COVID as like no one had the audacity to ask to work from home before, and now it's like you better let me work from home at least one day a week, right? But you're saying how many people are in your firm?
Now there are a lot, well over 1,000. By the time we merged, we were about 150.
Okay, and you said you were using this as a competitive differentiator, right?
For sure.
And even talk about the surveys that you were doing with your staff. Was this before COVID about their level of satisfaction?
Yeah, so we were pretty relentless about using employee surveying, just to, where can we be it better? And
like monthly, right?
Monthly, yeah, monthly surveying we were using inside of our, HRIS tools and things like this, but we were asking about, different things about whether it's compensation, benefits, flexibility, schedule. The thing that every single month across so many different, across people, no matter where they worked, we had team members internationally all over, the number one thing they wanted was flexibility. It was always about flexibility. And so, yes, we used to look back at like any big decision we were making that was going to impact the staff. And we're like, is this going to help or hurt flexibility? Because we kind of knew which way that decision was going to go and how it was going to be received by the team members. Like if it helped flexibility, we're like, yes, this is great. If it hurt it, and I'll tell you, I think overall for the profession, we were super happy to see what COVID did in at least acting as a forcing function to get, I think firms to think a little more progressively. However, I'll say selflessly as a firm, I was like, oh no. They're going to figure out some of the secrets we'd already figured out was if you let people work, it was a huge competitive advantage. We'd go to people who had been working in the traditional model. We tell them like, yeah, you can work wherever you want to work. We enable that. And you can pick however many hours a week you want to work. And so when other firms started adapting to that, we were a little like, oh no, they figured out our secret. Yeah. But that said, it was good for the entire profession to have that happen, in my opinion.
And I wanted to go back to Michelle for a bit to talk a little bit more about the generational differences, especially when we have like 4 or more people working within the same 4 walls, and then they want different things. So we were talking about, millennials were driving that. I was saying it used to be that people would say, like the boomers would say, I'm not looking at anyone on this table, would say that, they want to leave early to go to their kids' soccer game. But the Gen Y would say, I want to leave early to go to my own soccer game. I want to leave to play on my own team, right? So what are some of the things that firm owners should be looking out for when they have these different generations other than the flexibility?
Yeah. And I think when it comes to multi-generational, but also multicultural teams, because we're also seeing the global nature of the way that we work, and certainly one of the categories today is offshoring and outsourcing and how those things come together. So the way I like to look at it is people are at the end of the day people, regardless of generation, regardless of where they're located. So I think it's really 2 core things come to mind, which is communication and technology enablement as different ways that you can stay competitive when you're looking to retain and attract the top talent. Additionally, when it comes to different motivations and career aspirations, I think you really need to kind of boil down to what makes certain groups tick or certain individuals tick. I'm a huge fan of different theories on motivation. And a couple that really stand out for me are, one is the basic theory of 3 different drivers that could motivate people, and it's pride, praise, or prize. And
praise, or
yes, prize. So your prize people are not going to care as much about the shout out in the all hands meeting. They're not going to necessarily want the thank yous, but they're going to love a gift card. your pride people are not necessarily going to be very moved by a gift card, but they're going to love a thank you from the client directly, right? And then your praise people really do want that recognition. And as often as you can give it, and some maybe publicly, some privately, maybe a mix of both, the other, and you can kind of work that in your one-on-ones or in your team, you kind of can get a feel for that. The other thing that I think has come to mind when we talk about the generational differences, and we have all kinds of conversations, and I think every generation progressively thinks the generation below them is maybe not as hardworking and things like that. So I think, and we have all kinds of conversations about this, like how do I get my team to have the same drive that I have? And I think what it comes down to a lot of the time is your intrinsic motivators versus your extrinsic motivators as well. Some people are just more naturally intrinsically motivated, regardless of what is driving that intrinsic motivation, and others may need a little bit of extrinsic push. And so I think that theory of motivation really helps with guiding your teams regardless of generation or where they sit.
Yeah, you know, can I add something to that? Because you just made me think, and that was great what you said. I don't need to be here. You two guys, you guys all talk.
Change it again. He's just going to walk out.
Yeah, exactly. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks. It's been fun. No, when you were saying about the intrinsic and all that, what we found, and we've talked about this before we went live, that I do a survey, and it's a satisfaction survey within the profession, trying to find out what motivates employees or what makes them happy, and one of them was just the meaning that they get from their work and get doing the work that they love to do. And so often we come in and we just take the role that is offered to us, which is fine. But I love it when people go in and take that role, but then they see this other path and they see this place that'll take them to this, I like to call it the intersection of their passion and their skill. It'll take them to a place that they really love doing and they're really good at. And that, I think the survey found out, but I personally, just anecdotally, I find that when people are able to do that, that's a motivation by itself.
Yeah, it's a great point. And leaning into people's skill set and really their strengths.
Yep, for sure.
We need to take just a quick pause. We're not going anywhere. We just want to mention that you're going to see on the bottom of your screen the first CPE code for this session. So be sure to write this down if you're planning on getting CPE credit for this session. And Randy, I had a question for you. Back at the statistics you had in the beginning, there was one you said about what percentage of people leave, was it their firms or the profession after 3 years?
It was after 3 years, 41%. Now, these are stats that I found online.
Yeah.
I trust them.
Yeah.
We can double check my stats. But what it said is in the first 3 years in public accounting, 41% leave. And I can kind of believe that.
Do you think that's a throwback to when I got my CPA certificate, I needed 3 years before I could be licensed?
Right. That's not the rule now, right?
Yeah,
so I don't know if it's that.
Each state is different, but they're often less than, and some of them don't require a public accounting experience.
Right. And I don't want to call out any specific size of firm, but I think often it's maybe a larger firm where people want to just go through that experience and then they take that experience and they go wherever it is. Maybe it is a smaller firm, but in this stat, it is outside of public accounting.
I remember when I was starting, and it was Big 8 instead of Big 4 now, but it was job notices, help wanted notices would say, looking for someone with 3 years Big 8 experience.
Right.
That was it was checking a box for corporations that wanted someone in-house in their accounting department. They wanted that 3 years in the Big 8.
Yep.
And so that was the sort of the gold standard to be able to get that.
And that's how I look at that stat, is that's what people are doing. They're getting their experience and then they're deciding elsewhere. But that's the concern for me. Why are they deciding elsewhere?
Yeah.
What's happening where they're working right now that they say, and I'm using terms that they probably don't, but I have to escape this.
They're not being required to stay there 3 years. They could escape after one if they wanted, if they didn't like it.
And so that's part of that. I think the reality part of some of it that needs to be fixed. That's not a perception part, but I think there is a reality where maybe I'm overworked in that first 3 years and I have to get out of here. That's just my perception of what's going on there.
Yeah. And we were discussing this earlier around trying to imagine what young professionals who are entering the profession right now, what are they going through? Like why do they leave so quickly? And we were talking about how just this perception issue about us as accountants, as CPAs, like, is it really as challenging as that? Is all these terrible things here about the hours worked and such? In some cases, yes, we have to go through that, and we've worked in some of these places that hopefully many of us have started firms or started doing something different to try to address that issue. But one challenge we kind of noted was we felt like, the university, the systems that the students are coming through to get education at the end of the profession have largely been kind of ruled and dominated by the big eight, the big six, the big four, for good reasons in many cases, right?
Yep.
It was always told to us, me too, I was saying much like you, Gail, was where it's a great next step coming out of school. And I think it still is in many ways.
Yeah.
However, what I think gets lost in that message that's happening on probably college campuses is there are other alternatives too. Mm-hmm. And so you tend to go and you think, well, this is just the gold standard going to Big Four, and it's a great path. It's not the only standard. I think to me, I remember as a young professional, where I was the least happy was when I felt like I didn't have options. This was the only way. There was only one path. And so that kind of gets back to that notion of flexibility of where, wait a minute, this is a much more dynamic profession. And I think it does, I know, Randy, you've been such a cheerleader on this, and it hurts my heart too when I hear that people don't want to enter it, or they think, oh, it's just when actually it's such a dynamic profession. It's so interesting right now, but sometimes that message doesn't get through because I think people think, well, this is the only path I've got to go there because I do want to have on my resume that I've had the multiple years at wherever it might be. And that doesn't hurt someone, but I think something's not getting through entirely about how broad
you had a great point, You had a great point on if we can't do it at the level you were saying, how do we get in front of the college students or somebody, and obviously this is a question that's been brought up forever within the profession, but how do we get in front of that next generation to tell them there is a different path, there is more flexibility, this is such a fun place to hang out. And so this is our whole goal today. We're going to figure that out. We're going to figure out how to get in front of that generation.
Yeah, well, and I think one really interesting concept came up literally this morning. We were in a presentation from some of our Cohn-Resnick firm leadership, and some of this topic was being addressed. And what it made me think of just now is expectations and setting the right expectations coming through the door, even at that recruiting event or table. And I think we do have the tendency to set the expectation with people coming through the door and say, this is, super flexible, and you're going to have all this work-life balance and things like that, right? And then they come in, and there's perhaps different expectations depending on which group they come into or what time of year and things like that. So it was an interesting concept of setting the right expectations of you are going to come in, and there's definitely periods depending again on what area they come into. Obviously, we're in advisory, so there's periods where you're going to work really hard, but the payoff is that you're going to work for a leading firm, but you're going to have the opportunity. So in the case of our firm, to build expertise in an industry specific in your first 3 years that you would not have that opportunity elsewhere. So. It came up in the discussion of motivation and how to get people to be motivated to work harder. And then the question was posed back at the group of, well, challenge yourself. Are you actually really setting the right expectations? Because if you do that, you may start to filter out some people that maybe aren't willing to do that.
Well, I wonder through that kind of exercise of other firms who've gone through that, I thought, well, I wonder if it's not just setting expectations of this is how we work for the staff, if it's also, they're saying we need to think about how do we change our expectations of what we think a staff model should look like? Is it that we only hire people coming out of these universities, U.S. universities, and now people are going, I'm looking far afield across the globe for talent, or maybe I'm using third parties for help. There's lots of different ways I think firms can try to maybe reset some of those expectations for their teams or maybe for themselves.
I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, but first we're going to break for our second CPE code for this session. So be sure to write this code down if you plan on collecting CPE credit for this. And Kenji, you've had some experience with outsourcing, right?
Yes.
Offshoring.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. I had a good friend who, and actually was a client, who we saw went through some real difficult times in his business, and in fact had to do pretty significant layoffs here in the U.S. and thought the business was going to go under. And then he kind of realized, this was probably about a decade ago, he started looking and realizing, well, maybe I can hire some people offshore that literally is just for the cost structure benefit. Mm-hmm. And he did. And not only did it kind of save the business, he just found, he's like, these are wonderful team members. And so through that, he was kind of encouraging us to think about it. I thought, well, all right, let's maybe use a couple of independent contractors and try this out. And so we looked at the Philippines first. And we started just doing a few tasks internally for us, nothing client-facing. And we kind of had the same experience he had. We weren't in crisis trying to fix something, but it was like, wow, these were really talented individuals. And so bit by bit, we started adding like team members, like maybe let them do some client-facing work. And over time, that matriculated into where by the time this year when we exited, we were about a third of our team was global. We were pushing forward to go into 2026 with about 50% of the team global. Because we were just, and we actually went and used a lot of third-party help and contractors as we scaled a little bit bigger. Then we actually incorporated ourselves, our team in the Philippines. We had a separate team down in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. But we just found, the reason we kept doubling down on that was, yes, there was some great margin assistance and help there, and we talked earlier about doing employee surveying, because we were pretty relentless about this. What we were also seeing was our self-reported, our happiest employees were our ones who were international. And not only self-reported, our retention rate was highest amongst our international team members. So for us, it was a very clear signal of, this is a place we should invest more time and energy in. And so yes, we were.
Did you dig into it further to see why they were happy?
I mean, I think what we saw, again, it's pretty different in different places, but we found that compared to, the wages we were paying were much better than what they had been receiving in the Philippines. A lot of them were coming out of call center type of environments. And what we were allowing there was much more freedom and autonomy to grow as a professional, so they like that. And part of why we moved away from using third-party contractors and setting up our own entity there was because we wanted to give them some ability to influence the company themselves. And so they hadn't had much opportunity to really have ownership of something they had done before. And we just felt like very clearly, once we saw how they worked, that they worked just like our team did. We had team members who worked all throughout the US, and when they were global as well, they worked the same way. And so we wanted to make sure they felt treated just as fairly as our US team did. So we had a very, very positive experience with that. I know it's different for all firms, but we were very fortunate to have some folks who'd gone before us and encouraged us along the way. And then we had such positive experiences.
Well, and I think all three of you have had positive experiences, right? And it was funny because we were talking about this on the prep call the other day, about how many, many years ago when we were talking about offshoring, it was like, give them dummy computers, don't let them have access to anything. And now we're talking about, I'll go back to Michelle and then Randy, about incorporating their culture and how they work differently. So like really, this sounds horrible, but like thinking of them as a person as opposed to like a computer that's working for you while you sleep, which is how we kind of pitched it, 10 or 15 years ago. Sorry, there's a fly in here and it's very difficult to not swat at it. So, go ahead, Michelle.
Somebody had to. No, I find it really interesting, the perception of offshoring over time. There was a period of time that it was seen as, very elusive or negative, to where in order for a firm to get buy-in from their client to do it, or from an offshore provider to get buy-in from their firm to feel comfortable doing it, you had to make claims such as that, right? Like, or actually, obviously, set up the infrastructure where it was clean desks, not even, barely paper and pencils. Any belongings are locked up through the door. There's cameras. Like, you really had to go above and beyond to gain that level of comfort with the risk of offshoring. I do believe we did move past that well before COVID. But I do think what COVID did is it was an additional thrust and push into the trust that we enabled our offshore providers to have, because prior to COVID, remote work for offshore teams was practically unheard of, particularly for large firm groups, or I hadn't really heard of that type of flexibility. It was brand new to everybody. And I think it ended up being a wonderful thing that happened, which was, again, the realization that it's really, you got to put the right safeguards in place. Maybe there's some additional security protocol on computers, and certainly there's additional measures that you take into place. But I think that did a lot for their flexibility and their happiness as a result, and kind of being viewed as part of the team, not just from the firm, but end clients as well. And another learning that I've had in my career from leading different global teams. So one global team that I oversaw for about 4 years or so, when I came in, they were a well-established team. And I think that's a lot different of an experience than coming in, and we here built our CAS global team basically from the ground up. And I think there's different learnings there than coming into a well-established team. They've got quality control in place and things like that. So we've definitely, through trial and error, particularly with staffing, when we talk about staffing, one of the best things I think we did from a staffing perspective offshore is we hired managers first, essentially. We made sure we had really strong managers and assistant managers in place rather than kind of the other way around. And so that has been transformational for our team, certainly. Yeah.
It was interesting when you were saying that the perception and reality, like we were talking about earlier, the perception and reality have changed with the offshoring, and I think that's gone beyond the perception and reality gap that we have in public accounting in general, but it can be done, which is nice to see.
Yes.
You want me to go into our experience with this?
I'd like you to talk about the culture, because your firm is fully remote, right? But you bring people in globally, twice a year?
Yeah, twice a year we get together. So we are fully remote. So we've been in business 19 years now. We are, well, I lied. May will be 19 years. So we're approaching that. We're about 70 people right now all over the U.S. And we don't have a lot of offshoring or international, but I think we have 7 team members international. 1 in Mexico, 6 in India. And we're being fully remote, and this is something we probably should talk about too, but being fully remote, there's often a fear of, well, I hear this so often, how am I going to train people when we're in a remote environment? You got to get past that mindset because it can happen. And so we've been able to do that. That's probably for another episode of this ensuring success. But because we are fully remote, what we do to create the culture where people feel included, feel valued, feel part of something meaningful, feel like they're known. That is a huge thing. Mm-hmm. People want to be known on a personal level, not just a job title level, is that we get everybody together twice a year in a remote, always US, but remote location. And so this was the first time. We just did it last week in San Antonio. I was in this state last week, apparently. I never know where I am. And so we were here. And for the first time, and I don't know why it took so long, at least half of our India team members came in. And there was no, hey, here's the offshore team and here's our team. It was, here's Tri-Merit all together, and they just meshed in with everybody, even though they probably met everybody on the team, U.S.-based for the first time. They were vocal, they were interactive, they were participating, and they just, you could see that they just loved the experience of getting together with everybody and having these personal conversations. And so for me, that just highlighted that there's no way that they can't be there every year. They have to be there. And I don't know why it took us this long to get them there, but they have to be there every year because one of the biggest, most passionate topics I ever talk about is people first culture. And we can't do that with our entire team unless everybody's together twice a year to have this. I can go up and hug everybody rather than look at them on the TV. That was just so meaningful for me, and it was a great experience.
And Kane, you had Kenji, you had a similar experience, right? Where you fly people in. Is it every year or?
Yeah, every year we kind of had our own conference. We called it Acuity Con, but it was really kind of an all.
I was never invited.
I know. So, well, Randy, it was all hands for our team, and what we also found is like that being out and being at conferences amongst peers was really, and our partners, our tech partners, was such a great experience, and so we couldn't figure out a way to get all of our team to do that. So we're like, why don't we just do that ourselves? And so we brought in all of our tech partners, all of our team members. We spent a couple days together. And so it created that more, I view it now a little bit more as this hybrid model where some of us had some hybrid workspaces we could go work in if we needed to. But we like this, at least it worked well for our firm, to let people predominantly work from home or in whatever environment was comfortable for them or wherever they were traveling to, but knowing they were gonna have some touchstones throughout the year. Every staff being able to come to Atlanta, our headquarters, once a year. We had different teams and leadership teams that would get together quarterly in physical places. So at one point we thought, well, this is great. We're gonna save so much money by being remote and not having to pay office leases. Well, we found that like no, you don't, because you give it all back in travel and bringing people together, and that wasn't really the point. We're trying to find ways to give people the environment that they are most productive in and most comfortable in, and people do need that human element. So yeah, it was a very successful, and for us, it did mean that myself and others were traveling quite a bit, but to, just like this, the opportunity to be amongst peers and friends and colleagues, that makes a huge difference. So,
well, we don't let you do this via Zoom. That was like one time.
COVID only.
That's it. One time only. One time only.
Do you guys have any tips on training people who you're not maybe never going to see in person, but definitely who are remote and maybe far away remote?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say first, I'm glad that the topic of training is coming up because I do always say with outsourcing and offshoring particularly, and for anyone that has not done it and is getting into it, maybe a little afraid of it, I always tell people you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And as far as leveling the playing field, we've definitely done that in terms of leveling expectations. A U.S. senior versus a global senior manager, global manager, leveling out the expectations, and certainly it's not ever going to be a perfect process, but the more you put into training, and not just broadly speaking training, but client-specific training as well. So we really encourage our managers and seniors that are on accounts that they're going to be a little bit more client-facing just due to time zones, is to really, don't forget to loop them in or give them the meeting recording and make them really feel part of it. Make sure they understand the why behind what they're doing is also really transformational. And then as far as just the tactical stuff, it's just, again, it's really taking the time to spend with them. And there are different tools that you can use. You can do like video recordings and things like that, but there's really nothing better than live sessions, I think, personally.
Agree.
I think we as hard as, again, COVID was, we've mentioned this a few times, again, it creates this interesting opportunity through times of challenge or all these restrictions to force you to think a little differently. And we happen to have a ton of, I guess, parents who worked at Acuity. And I think sometimes your company reflects yourself, and my kids who were coming through COVID, which is a terrible time to go anything, especially school. We were watching our kids adjust and transition to how are they going to do school? And so we actually were taking bits and pieces of things like, wait a minute, what training should we do live? Which ones can be asynchronous? Which ones do we have to make sure? And so it was funny, we were watching the way our kids were trying to, not always successfully, things that worked and didn't work, and learn a little bit from that of how can you use, because not everything has to be live. Mm-hmm. There's some things that are honoring people's time where you can do it asynchronous. There's sometimes you can reach out to your technology partners, whether it's Xero or Canopy or anyone else there, and say, hey, we're trying to help the team on some workflow issues or something new in your product. Can we get some training? And I've always found that our tech partners have been great too about lending a hand and assisting and saying, hey, would you like us to help put on training? So there's a lot of resources, I think, if you look around, and we found that again, that weird time of COVID was kind of one of those times where we got to think about this differently, and let's take a look at, how our kids are doing this.
So there's one aspect that we didn't touch upon yet here in this session, but we did touch upon in other sessions, which is outsourcing, which is different because they're not really, or sometimes they're an extension of your team, they're a referral. How do you figure out who you're going to outsource what to, and how do you still make them be part of your team?
I personally think, things that you, especially depending on your size or where you're at in your growth trajectory within your CAS group, and I think it makes the most sense for things that are complex and you're not immediately able to execute very well, but it's in high demand. And so 2 examples of that within our group is payroll and HR. And it's highly specialized. There's a lot of compliance that goes into it, and it's in high demand from our clients. And so that's an easy area for us to partner with the right professionals to make sure we're able to deliver that to our clients as an area that maybe you don't have directly in-house. Another area, and I'm very, very close to this area, is technology. And we do, of course, have an in-house and global technology expertise, but depending on the specific system and how much business you're doing in that system, and especially if you're a smaller group or a smaller firm and you want to stay competitive and be able to offer your client those technology services, but it can be difficult to staff for due to the fluctuation in nature and the uncertainty around projects. So that's another great area that if you can find yourself a really trustworthy, great external consultant there, where we found success in the past as well.
So we've This is a topic I love talking about because we are an outsource partner. That's what TriMerit does. And so, but to go back a little bit, for my first 15 years of my career, I was a generalist. I started a generalist firm, ran that for 15 years, and always thought I had to do everything. I had to have all the answers. I had to, and looking back, I missed so many things. I didn't even know what cost seg was. Cost seg is a huge thing we do now. I didn't even know what cost seg was at that time. And so I think very similar to what you're saying, you have to realize you can't do everything. You cannot be an expert at everything. Do you know how big, and we deal with tax, you know how big the tax code is? There's no way that you can deal with everything. And so to get to your answer, your question in a second, when we started this, it was a little bit, we want to be part of your team. Like you were saying, that's how we marketed what we were doing. But that is not a really fast process because they have to trust that you know what you're doing. They have to trust that you're not going to ruin the relationship you have with your clients. But once you do that, once you find that right partner, it is like you're part of the team. I mean, I have so many friends who are accountants around the country that I met because we've done work with them. And they know they can reach out to me or anybody on our team at any time with anything. And so if you really are in an area where, you are 1, 2, 3, 10, whatever, even 20 people, there's no way you can do everything. If there are services you want to add, that's a lot of time and effort to add those services. You can still service your client being that advisor, being that expert, being that go-to for all the questions they have, and find those partners that you can team up with, that you trust, that you know are going to do work, that'll bring services to your client. And that, to me, is a much better way to scale than to try to do this all on your own.
Yeah. The best example I ever saw of this was we had a client, the women's hosiery company Spanx, right? And so, yes, I'm probably one of the few. I've had to wear male Spanx before too. The things you do for your clients is kind of crazy sometimes.
That's how you look like that. Look at
I'm
you.
wearing it now. No, but. So Sarah, who's the founder there, was relentless about they only wanted to work on the things that they were very passionate about internally.
Yep.
So not only not competent, but like passionate.
Yes.
And she was passionate about marketing and about product design. Not about manufacturing, women's hosiery, not about finance or accounting, not about IT. And those things were all outsourced. And that was the most successful company we ever saw. It just absolutely went to the moon because they stayed so focused on what it is they as a company were passionate about, and the other things they cared about. I mean, they wanted it done right, but they're like, that's someone else is passionate about that elsewhere. Us, the accounting, which is what some people find weird, we are passionate about that. But not to your point, Randy, being a generalist is not for everyone. And it was such a great example that I always remember back to where everyone has these gifts and skills, and trying to do all of them is going to be a fiasco.
And that's even a great example for your clients. When your clients, you have a client that starts a business, they start a restaurant. They're not going to be, they didn't start the restaurant because they want to do the accounting. Oh, so now you're their outsourced partner for that. They didn't start the restaurant because they enjoy, designing a new menu from a
and I don't want you in there cooking me food.
And
right?
And so even with your clients, you could tell there's with a gig economy and everything right now, there's nothing that can't be outsourced. There's nothing that you should do that you don't enjoy doing, whether it's you as the practitioner or even you as the client, because you can outsource anything. And if you can concentrate, as you just said, on the things that you're passionate about, the things that you love doing, there's no stopping you.
We're going to take a quick pause for our next CPE code. Please, thank you. Post that on the screen. This is our third CPE code for this session. If you are planning on collecting CPE credit, please write down this code so you'll have it later. We had a kind of an interesting question that came in. It's sort of a chicken egg thing, I think. So the question is, with offshoring, do you feel that we are going to cut down on U.S. graduates wanting to go into accounting? And I think to me, my impression is there aren't enough U.S. graduates coming out of accounting, and that's one reason why we are offshoring. But is the opposite true as well? I'm not really sure.
I'll speculate on this, but they're going to have much better answers than me.
Okay.
But my speculation is it won't hurt the U.S. people going into the profession, and it's not necessarily this is the way that you offshore, but you can offshore the things that are not the passionate things, the advisory things that you're doing. So there's things you can offshore and you can outsource them as well that are more the compliance work or whatever else that now let you do the sexy things in advisory and to be with your client and help them succeed and keep you away from the data entry. And I know that's not what outsource or offshoring completely is, but that's one way you could use it. And so I think that alone can help with that perception issue that we're having and reality issue where it's like, yeah, we don't have to be, I don't have to enter all the data. And again, I know that's not what offshoring is, but that is one thing that they could do on an offshore capacity or an outsourced capacity that now I can concentrate on this. Hey, we want to increase your EBITDA. We want to, you're leaking cash right now. Let's dig into this. Let's figure it out. We can now concentrate on that. What the advisory end of things is, is so exciting. So that's how I see that going.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting question because I normally see that that question get posed when it comes to automation, and are we going to need less people with automation?
Like AI?
Right. Yes, as in
Yay.
AI.
We have to get into every session.
We did it. I'm so glad
Mark it off your bingo card.
Yes.
There it is.
Jackpot. So yes, with AI, and I feel like it's like word of the day, and the answer is no. We're not going to need people any less, whether they're here in the U.S., whether they're globally. I think it's interesting to think about it in the way that the question was posed, because I don't normally think of it that way either. And what Randy just described is that also the traditional model of offshoring, the more remedial bookkeeping, data entry type tasks, is actually lessening with the rise of AI. And so we're upskilling everyone at the end of the day. So I think our strategies will have to change. And I certainly don't have all the answers for exactly how that's going to change, but I think everyone's going to need to upskill. And the way that I would see it, just based on the information available to me today where I sit, is that our offshore staff will become they're going to be looking for the anomalies. They're going to be reviewing the AI's work. And our U.S. staff will be more like the relationship builders and providing those true value-add advisory services. We want to level up our global staff as well, but I think that's kind of how things are going to level up together.
Yeah, I love that you called that out about this is something that usually we hear about. It's automation that's going to start taking away. But I think in the same regard, yes, people have thought, well, offshoring is going to do that too. And I'm in agreement that where I believe, and I know we've seen only a few recent years or quarters where we've seen a bit of an uptick.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's we can call it trend yet, but we're starting to see some uptick in the number of students going into the accounting profession, which is great. But I think that's going to continue. And I only think that just from my own little narrow perspective of when I went into accounting, I went in because I wanted to go in and understand business. I wanted to learn the language of business, which we were taught we were going to do. Yet when I got into public, I'm ticking and tying work papers and I'm doing a bunch of back office clerical tasks, when I got into industry. And I really struggled. I wasn't sure I was going to stay in a profession because I'm like, where is this learning about how business works? And it wasn't there. And so I think that with other teams around the world being able to help augment our staff, whether in technology, a lot of that clerical work, to your point, is going to go away. And so hopefully the people who get into it for that same reason and passion of wanting to understand and help translate that language of business actually get a chance to do it much earlier in their career. And so I hope and believe there should be a little bit of an uptick where you're not going to have to go through that 5-10 years from you of wandering through like just kind of the grind of all the T accounts and ledgers and debits and credits and journal entries. I mean, maybe some people love all that, but I don't think most accountants really are looking for that when they come out.
Yeah, I'd say one thing that's been really interesting for me over this past summer as our first year with true CAS interns, and then right now we just got done interviewing for our incoming class of summer interns. And I know until I really got closer to the college type students in accounting, I know we talk about a lot the visibility of CAS and advisory in universities and in colleges, and will they ever realize that we exist? Do they know that this is a path? And I've been really encouraged by the knowledge that those obviously applying for the position, they did their homework, but I've been really encouraged by it. So I don't miss the opportunity to tell them to spread the word to their friends and get it out there. I think we have a lot of work to do, but I've been really encouraged by it. And I think, Kenji, they have a lot of the same aspirations that you shared. And even we did have the full summer program, and we gave them a lot of exposure to Copilot and AI while still exposing them to the real work that needs to get done. And we got really great feedback, and we actually did hire one on full time. So
cool.
yeah, I'm really enjoying that experience. Yeah.
Just to build off that, I don't know how much time we have, but I'm a scholarship judge for AICPA, and the applications that I see from these students, it's like, they are so far advanced from where I was when I was in college. I can't even believe, but that's why I'm so positive, or so have this attitude that this profession is going to be great. And it is great, but it's going to continue to be great because the people coming in, the passion they're showing in these applications, and the knowledge is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Nice.
So no need to panic.
No panic. No panic. We started with panic.
Yeah,
We're not
exactly.
going
Had to
hook 'em in.
panic.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for an incredible panel. This was a really great way to end the day on such a high note, talking about the profession that we all are a part of and that we all, one way or another, love, or we hope we do.
Yeah.
We do.
So thank all of you. We want to thank all of our sponsors for this event. This is the end of, well, almost the end of day one. We've finished 7 sessions. We have 7 sessions tomorrow. We want to see you tomorrow again at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. on the West Coast, 4 a.m. in Hawaii. Come one, come all. We even have some international attendees. I have no idea what time it is where they are, but we love the fact that people all over the world are watching this. We're going to wrap up right now, but before you leave, we're going to show 2 brief commercials from 2 of our sponsors, and you need to stay for these because the second commercial is, in our minds, the most fun commercial of the whole conference, so you're not going to want to miss that. We'll see you all tomorrow at Ensuring Success 2025.